Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum to all our dear viewers and listeners wherever you are watching from around the world. Welcome back to another episode of the After Maghrib Podcast. And I really hope everyone has been benefiting and learning something new over the last few weeks during the sorrowful month of Muharram from our weekly shows. And inshallah, before we dive straight into this podcast, I want to welcome my co-host Ahmed. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam, Sayed Ali, how you doing?
Alhamdulillah. How's Muharram been?
It's been good.
Far? I know
Yeah,
we've passed
alhamdulillah.
Ashura and
We've had a couple of weeks, I think, we've had a week or two since Ashura to kind of process, to continue and keep up the momentum, inshallah, which is our goal. And alhamdulillah, it's okay. There's a lot of activity at the moment. There's a lot of majalis in the community. Everyone's hosting at their homes, seminars for the youth. So alhamdulillah, things are going well. But today, Sayyid Ali, we've got an interesting discussion.
we do because, you know, it's related to Muharram, Imam Hussein, but it's less sorrowful and I think it's more insightful for everyone.
Inshallah.
And before I do mention the podcast, I'd like to welcome our special guest on today's podcast. Assalamu alaikum. Abdullah, Tarek.
Assalamu alaikum
from
rahmatullah.
Sweden.
From Sweden, yes.
Welcome
indeed.
to the UK. It's good to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. No.
How have you found the UK so far?
UK is very nice. Reminds me of home, Sweden. Just that the roads are different and the cars drive on.
Is it your first time in the UK?
Actually, it's my second time. The first time I was here, I was doing a different show, and I was here for a few days, and I went back, and this is my second time.
I'm sure everyone's wondering what we're talking about. And let's dive in. So the conversation we really want to have here today, Ahmed, but more importantly with brother Abdullah, who's our special guest here, is what is the importance or what, shall I say, value social media has had or other media platforms, importance for the message of Karbala or Imam Hussein?
It's a very interesting question because if it were not for YouTube, if it were not for Instagram, if it were not for Twitter, a lot of people would miss out on very important lectures or snippets of lectures where people utilize those videos and learn a few historical aspects of Karbala, of the characters who were in Karbala, and of the people who sacrificed themselves for the message of Islam, generally speaking.
It's interesting because there's definitely a couple of angles to kind of dissect this with. The first is obviously looking at Muharram online from the perspective of the Shia community.
Yeah.
And the service that we, especially like, for example, as us as content creators, the sort of goal that we have to create online content for the community within. And then, of course, there's the external content that we put out there to give and to kind of promote the message of Abdullah Hussein to the wider community, to wider society more generally. So maybe there's different ways we can approach this, but it's definitely an interesting thing. Maybe we could argue that in the last 20 years, we've seen an exponential growth in terms of not just the quantity of content, but the quality of content that's coming out on media platforms, and then of course responses on social media platforms. So it's an interesting way to look at it. But yeah, I don't know really where to begin. It's such a big discussion.
I know where to begin. Abdullah,
Yes.
how has online platforms played a role in your life?
So social media essentially has taught me, I'd say about 90% of what I know when it comes to Tashayyu and when it comes to Islam in general. Like, we started off with small Instagram posts here and there. That was before my Tashayyu. And, you know, I was introduced to Tashayyu through these group chats and spaces and these lives or whatever you want to call it, right? So, in a way, you can argue even that if it were not for YouTube, like the lectures that I watch on YouTube of, you know, certain scholars or whatnot, then I wouldn't have had, you know, been introduced to a lot of historical aspects. And even so, I was introduced to like a certain amount of websites that give us information and that give us like books and sources, which is is very beneficial. But it comes essentially from social media. But how about you guys? How has social media been like a source
You
of...
mentioned YouTube.
Yes.
And straight away, I just remembered, it's been like, I think almost 10 years since I've really been, taking some sort of, should I say, lectures at home, listening to lectures at home on YouTube. And it's amazing to see like direct access whenever you want to hear a lecture, be it Muharram, Ramadan, or you want to hear a lecture. It can be about anything. It can be, for example, about halal, haram. It can be about music, whatever it is. You can find it on YouTube. And I find it is something so beautiful to have quick access. Sometimes you might have a question. Sometimes someone may ask you a question and you want to relate to them, but show them, for example, this scholar mentioned this ruling or this scholar mentioned this thing. And it's amazing to have that quick access.
We forget, and a lot of the times we become complacent, because for the first time in the history of Shia Islam, we actually have direct, instant access to information. Literally in our pockets.
Yeah.
You can find the answer to anything, whether it's halal, haram, mustahab, or makruh, whatever sort of question you have access to good and you have access to bad. But that access to instant information can be dangerous.
It can.
Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
And of course, there's so many pros and cons. We have to weigh up and balance the arguments. But generally speaking, when we talk about social media, and of course, in the podcast in the past, we've talked about the dangers and the threats of social media. And inshallah, today we'll talk about maybe some of the opportunities that social media presents. But I found that interesting, Abdullah, how you said that 90% of your knowledge came from social media. Because for YouTube particular. And I think all of us...
and group chats
I think for all of us, we're from a generation where certain prominent scholars in the English language have taught us the majority of what we know.
Yes.
From especially on a foundation level, going through the ages of bulugh, especially for me, you're becoming a young man, and you need to learn about issues in the world. You need to know about the biography of imams, or you need to know about some of the challenges that are faced towards the Shia school. And some of these answers are found on social media where perhaps they were or weren't taught in our madrasas, if we even went to them. Do you see what I mean? So that is an incredible opportunity out there, and I think maybe for parents who are listening at home, it's maybe a challenge to parents at home to investigate and research how much content is out there, because there is a lot there. But it's an interesting one, because there is a threat, and there is obviously misguiding information.
There is, because you can see everything. We can receive the most incorrect, false information about everything and anything, and I think it happens today. And lots of people get misinformed about.
But let me ask you, if you don't mind,
okay?
Because your initial question was about Abdullah al-Hussein, and I've kind of taken us on a tangent.
Yeah,
but when you talk about Muharram, you talk about the spreading of the message of the Imam. What comes to your mind?
Really? Instagram.
The
first thing that comes to my head is Instagram, because alhamdulillah, especially now we are in the month of Muharram and Safar, everything that's on my feed is like Muharram related.
Yeah.
So every day I'm either listening to a short clip by a scholar, or I'm listening to a lesson that I can learn that happened at Karbala. So it's like non-stop of learning new things when it comes to Muharram, for the month of Muharram. But I want to talk about the dangers of it.
Yeah.
So sometimes we can hear something, believe it's right, and it's not.
Yeah,
and I don't know
definitely.
if that's had an impact, or you've experienced anything yourself.
Well, there's a lot of pages out there that will give you a quote by said Imam or the Prophet,
and it doesn't exist.
And it never exists. There's no source. It just slap.
What's your favorite fake hadith?
There's a lot.
I think we should put it out there.
There's
people at home. You know which one it is? I've heard.
Which one?
The flower in the palm fragrance. Some mother
one that said,
be like the
flower.
Or like, be like water, my friend. They quote Bruce Lee and they say it's Imam Ali.
It's
very
anything. But I think the point being is that we have thousands of exemplary.
We have Ahlul Bayt, exactly. So we have a lot of hadith from مثلا الكافي, Kitab al-Kafi, or from Bihar al-Anwar. But rather than referring back to those, you have they quote Bruce Lee and they ascribe it to the Imams for some reason.
Because when you let me give you an example. You love something,
yes,
and you want to present it in the most fashionable and appealing way to someone as possible. I'll give you an example. I'm a Liverpool fan, as many people know on the podcast, as I always mention.
Me too.
I love. Are you?
Yeah,
mashallah. As I was saying, so if let's say we love our football club,
yes,
we want to promote our football club, and we want to tell people how much we love it and why it's the best team in the world.
Definitely.
What we'll do is we'll find the most appealing things, something like an emotional video, sentimental this, that, and we'll put it out there. The same way when we talk about Abdullah al-Hussein, which of course means abundantly more to us than anything material,
Definitely.
like sports or whatever. But something like that, people will find a way to try and sell it or advertise it in such a way where you use fake hadith, and you may not know it. It's it's innocent a lot of the time. You're innocently ignorant, as someone once said to me, and you put it out there in a way that's fashionable, maybe, but it's dangerous because obviously there's a risk of deviating us and obviously the followers. And nowadays, it's interesting. Sorry, I'm rambling, but it's interesting the use of the word follower, because when you follow someone, you're consuming voluntarily the information that they put out there. And you are, for years at times, at some points, you are following the tweets, the ideologies, and so on that people are putting out there.
Follow the After Maghrib podcast.
Follow the After Maghrib podcast. Hit subscribe.
Definitely.
1,000 subscribers by the end of 2022.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. But if, for example, we might see the most innocent, like I said earlier, an innocent tweet, which someone may put out there not knowing that it's maybe deviating or maybe not very accurate. For example, someone might tweet something about the concept of tawassul or wasila, and they may word it in such a way which is outside the tenets of Shia Islam. Do you see what I mean? Where it becomes, do you see what I mean? Exaggerated and whatnot. And I think a lot of us agree at home that the ultimate goal is to find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and use tawassul as a means to elevate and to adorn your prayer, your worship to Allah, if that makes sense.
Become closer to Allah.
Become close to Allah.
Yeah.
But of course, there's the trap, and we see a lot on social media. People fall into the trap of exaggerating tawassul and
It
come
becomes
across
ghulu, right?
Yes,
It
yes,
becomes
yeah.
exaggeration.
But that's an example, one example of you have someone who's feeling very passionate. They come home, it's the 9th night of Muharram, and they've heard the best lecture of their life, and they start tweeting, Ya Imam, give me everything I want in this world. Ya Imam, this, that, I pray to you, X, Y, and Z. Now, the terminology is a very tricky one for us. Now, obviously, that's a very specific example as well. But what I mean to say is, if we're talking about the message of Abdullah al-Hussein and social media, we can either fall into the trap of becoming propagators of the truth or propagators of falsehood, and that's for us as an individual on an individual basis to take that responsibility to do the research and obviously be responsible online. But when we talk about the opportunities that social media presents, there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to gain. A lot of knowledge.
Definitely, because you can find beauty in it, but you can also find danger. And were it not for your, like, let's say everyone's individual intellect, like every person and his intellect, if you were not intelligent enough, you would fall into the danger of following the wrong posts and falling into extreme perhaps. And if you, like any other person who uses the intellect, sees that this is a danger, you would divert away from it, and you would benefit from the beautiful posts that exist. Like there's beautiful threads out there on, let's say, Twitter, that speak about, mathalan, for example, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's a beautiful thread that goes around and speaks about a hadith, this surah, this ayah. Allah says that this, He's the most merciful and He forgives all sins. And this Imam says this, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And you have the next thread that speaks about salah and how to perfect your salah. And the next post about zakat, fasting, everything, right? And all of these things are beneficial and beautiful. And then you can have, for example, I've experienced in group chats, you have conversations. People have, quote unquote, they have debates or conversations, right? And during those conversations, you see that this guy follows this scholar. So he has this opinion. And this person was very knowledgeable. He follows this scholar. And this is the scholar's opinion. So it's very fruitful to see such conversations take place.
I think just to add to that, though, there's also, as for every, there's so many benefits, so many opportunities, and anyone can be a content creator on social media. I think we need to remember that, because you can share a positive experience, or you can share something that you've learned with your friends and with your followers, and that's the beautiful thing about social media. You learn and you share. So we have to be conscious that when we tweet or when we post on Instagram, anyone in the world can access it, and that can be a danger or it can be an opportunity. When we talk about opportunities, we have to remember that the story of Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salam itself is viral in its nature. His story is infectious with the love. We always
not
talk
just
about
to
this.
the Shia,
to the
I've
world.
actually seen engagement by even
Yes.
non-Shias,
of course,
connecting with the
Subhanallah.
message of Karbala and Imam Hussein. And I apologize. I interjected.
No, no,
very
Bismillah.
randomly, but I had a thought that came to my head, and it was like, I think me for sure. I'm sure I can speak on your behalf. We were lucky to be raised without the need of online media, or whatever it is, to
Alhamdulillah.
gain any, shall we say, Islamic knowledge or learn about the attributes of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, or going as far as what happened at Karbala on the day of Ashura.
Yeah.
But for many, they don't have that
They
privilege.
didn't have that, yeah.
For many, the online platforms is the only thing they can access to better knowledge and understanding of Islam.
Yeah, I see
Yeah.
your point, because a lot of this knowledge, you can find it in, let's say, 3 places. If you weren't on social media, you would find, let's say, if you went back 100 years, you'd find this knowledge in lectures. So you go to a majlis and the sheikh is sitting on the minbar, or the Sayyid, and he gives you the maqtal night by night during Muharram, and then you kind of get an image of what the maqtal really was like in Karbala during 3 years, right? Then you have the books itself. There's books of the maqtal of what happened to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And the third option is, of course, going to school, like madrasa, and they teach you this is what happened. Some people don't have that privilege. For instance, myself, I did not.
Especially if they're not really raised in a Shia household. I think
Exactly. So, especially if someone who isn't from a Shia household, or Shia, not necessarily a Shia household, but Shia community, let's say. There's a lot of people that live in different countries that are not necessarily Shia. They are against Shias, Nasibis. And now you're Shia living in a population that is in majority against your beliefs. So now, if you want to attend the majlis, you're risking your life. Just like the people who went to ziyarah during the times of, let's say Saddam, people were risking their lives. This was very dangerous. Some people were getting killed, some people were getting kidnapped. And in a sense, now, some people are afraid to go to majalis in these set countries.
That's why it's so important. Sorry to interrupt. That's why it's so important for there to be beneficial and substantial content out there.
Online,
100%. So you have YouTube, there's majalis.
Yes.
You have said Sheikh and said Sheikh and said Sayyid. All of these great Sada and great Shuyukh that are out there that present the message of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam in such an eloquent, beautiful way for the people that can't attend majalis.
And to add to that as well, for those who don't know about the story of Imam al-Hussein, there's so many opportunities and things which can be shared on social media. For example, there are so many organizations, to name one, who's Hussein, an incredible global platform which presents the message of Abdullah al-Hussein to the wider world, to the general public, in a face-to-face capacity, by handing things out, by having events, interfaith, and so on and so forth. Things like that can be shared on social media and can reach people and touch their hearts. And that is something we can adapt in terms of our goals. That when we talk about Muharram online, we go from engaging in issues which are waste of time and useless, to be really honest.
No, you're right.
Waste of time issues, and find ways to connect with the wider world and with other people and learn from each other. Inshallah, that's the ultimate goal.
Inshallah.
So Abdullah, before you head out, because I know you're flying away soon,
Inshallah.
let me ask you one question. Final question. This is...
Don't ask him something that he won't come back.
Yeah, well, I was actually going to say to you, this is your second trip to London. When are we seeing you again, inshallah?
Inshallah, very soon. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Are we going to see you online on social media before that?
I will definitely be online, inshallah, sharing my input towards the Shia community.
Alhamdulillah. And have you got any message for the viewers or anything? Because we always do the subscribe, like, share.
Yeah, so before we get into the like, share, subscribe, I would urge everyone out there in the world to, at the very least, because we have this thing called an Imam of our time, that many of us, we mention it as lip service, but not many of us actually know who the Imam of our time is. We don't research the books that are مثلا Kitab al-Ghayba by al-Nu'mani. We have a lot of very beautiful books that let us understand who our Imam of our time is and to get closer to him. Because we have an Imam, we can speak to him, he can hear us.
We forget he's living.
We forget he's living.
We
forget we have a Hujjatullah on earth, a proof of existence of God on earth. And once we research who he is, we understand that we have a duty to uphold, which is to develop ourselves to the point where we can be ready for the reappearance of the Imam. And once we develop ourselves, that's when we hasten reappearance. Because a lot of us, we do that, you know, may Allah hasten reappearance of Sahib al-Asr al-Zaman Ajal Ta'ala Faraj Sharif. But do we really work on ourselves to actually make him come back, to actually make him reappear?
And are we worthy representatives of the Imam on social media? Because social media at the end of the day is still real life, and we are still representing him, or we aim to represent him, and maybe sometimes we forget that. We slip on social media, we swear, we reply with foul language to people. Things like that is not representative or not becoming of the followers of Imam al-Hujjah. So that's something, inshallah, we can maybe reflect on, and inshallah we can change.
Inshallah. It's interesting that you mentioned the post and slipping out and stuff, because a lot of people forget that comments, messages and posts, when you insult someone, the malaika are still there.
It's still real life.
God is still going to hold you accountable for your comments and your posts when you're insulting people and stuff. I like that, something along those lines, right? So inshallah, our viewers out there, if you leave with a message, at least let it be one of those two. Research your Imam, and remember that God is always watching, at the very least.
I love that.
That's
an amazing way to end the conversation. You know, the remembrance of our living Imam. Let me point that out again.
100%.
And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And now we need to like and subscribe. Endorsement.
Like and subscribe. Follow After Maghrib, inshallah. And remember these two beautiful men right here. Great guys, great souls, and beautiful message as well.
Habibi Abdullah, thank you very much for coming on.
It's been an honor.
And thank you for spending time with us here in your busy schedule.
The conversation.
I've loved this conversation.
And inshallah, I look forward to seeing you once you're back in London.
Inshallah. I hope to see you guys again, inshallah.
Inshallah. Brothers and sisters, we will be back next week, of course, continuing our Muharram season of content. And inshallah, we look forward to seeing you then. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.